With the release of Shadowkeep, the collector's edition of the expansion included a series of ciphers to decode on your very own Cryptoglyph. Once these were solved, you would be able to enter these codes into Bungie.net and you would be introduced to a set of web lore entries. Each of these entries were written as a matter of record for the Hive, and all of them revolve around a central theme, our long dead and defeated Taken King Oryx. And after reading these entries, I can, within a given amount of certainty, predict that Auryx will return, and those efforts are being orchestrated by Savathun. This is Videogame Crosstalk, and I hope you enjoy this Destiny lore video. The initial precedence for this statement is set in the Books of Sorrow. I will jump around a bit in this book for relevant entries for the sake of a coherent discussion. These entries will serve as a preface for the Cryptoglyph entries, and the Festering Core Strike's dialogue and narration, which is the gameplay that I am using for this discussion, will bring everything together. One thing of note is that in the new web lore entries is a full transcript of the Destiny 1 Grimoire card, verse 5-9, I'll make sure, which is the final verse in the Books of Sorrow. In it, Auryx goes on one of his self-exploration journeys and reflects upon the existence that he has created. Those who are new to Destiny may be confused at a particular part where he claims that this book will be a guide to those who find it. In short, these Grimoire cards were unlocked as the player found calcified fragments on Auryx's ship, the Dreadnought, which was the location for the Taken King expansion and the King's Fall raid. By working with Eris Morn, we were able to craft the exotic scout rifle Touch of Malice. Quote, "So I will prepare a book, which is a map to a weapon, and my vanquisher will read that book, seeking the weapon, and they will come to understand me, where I have been and where I was going. And then they will take up my weapon, and they will use it. They will use that weapon, which is all that I am. And armed thus with my past and my future and my present, which is a weapon that takes whatever is available, a weapon bound to malice, they will mantle me, Auryx, the Taken King. They will become me and I will become them, each of us defeating the other, correcting the other, alloying ourselves into the omnipotent philosophy. Thus I will live forever. I'll make sure." This entry is so fundamental to the discussion that Bungie actually repeated it for the Cryptoglyph lore. It states in what was at first understood to be a metaphorical context that Auryx lives on, but apparently it's a bit more literal. Worth noting before moving on that the concept that the use of a dark weapon to feed a dark deity has been used before in Destiny 2, with the Whisper of the Worm being a tool that feeds Xol. Moving earlier in the Books of Sorrow to verse 3-9, Carved in Ruin, this entry establishes the precedence that by acting in another's nature, they may be resurrected from beyond the void. In earlier entries, Auryx had beheaded his sisters, Xivu Arath and Savathun, so that he may become strong enough to defeat the worm god Akka and learn additional secrets of the deep. Auryx does in fact defeat Akka and takes what he learned from doing so to forward his crusade. Now armed with this additional knowledge, Auryx goes all out making war with the Ecumeni for 100 years. Quote, "At the end of those 100 years, he killed the Ecumeni Council on the Fractal Wreath, and from their blood rose Xivu Arath, saying, 'I am war, and you have conjured me back with war.' Auryx was glad, for he loved Xivu Arath. The Ecumeni wailed in grief." And rightfully so, because now the Ecumeni had to face two of the Hive gods, now armed with the secrets of the deep that they could only have learned by slaying a worm god. So Auryx and Xivu Arath continued their war for another 40 years. Auryx then made a deal with a Dakua nest, claiming that he was jealous of his sister and wanted help in defeating her. Quote, "But he drove the Dakua nest into a trap, and they were made extinct. From their ashes rose cunning Savathun, saying, 'I am trickery, and you have conjured me back with trickery.' Auryx was glad, for he loved Savathun. Ecumeny fled into the void. So here's the precedence that is set. By acting in an extreme manner that is in alignment with the Hive god's nature, it is possible for them to be conjured back into existence. But what about Auryx? His nature is to never stop learning and exploring, and as we learned in verse 2.0, Immortals, we learned that his old name Auryx means long thought. How exactly would you act in that kind of extreme? Perhaps there is another race that can serve as an example. In verse 4.10, an emperor for all outcomes, and other subsequent entries, Auryx battles and wrestles with the Vex. Here, the Vex had made their way into Auryx's throne world by the carelessness of his son Crota. What confused Auryx about the Vex was their nature of being hyper-logical. After some short-term solutions of dealing with the Vex and punishing Crota by throwing him into the Vex dimension, Auryx consults with Savathun to figure out what the heck is going on. What Auryx does understand is that the Vex also wish to live forever, just as he does, and that he has met a worthy opponent. Quote, "Meanwhile, Auryx brooded on the Vex. I've met a worthy rival," he said. "They want to exist forever, just as I do, but I don't understand them." At this, his worm began to chew on him, for he was bound to understand. Since he does not fully understand the Vex, Auryx's worm begins to chew on him, because it is Auryx's nature to understand everything. What we know now is that the Vex do not just catalog and understand things. They do this so that they can create predictions and simulations in effort of determining the best course of action so that they may be victorious and maintain the pattern. In order to do this, they must plan for every potential, every outcome, every variable. To do that, they turn entire planets into supercomputers for the sole purpose of managing these computations. In later dealings, we see that the Vex mind that came through the gate, Coria, Blade Transform, attempted to simulate Auryx in an effort to understand him. The first attempts were laughably bad, but each interaction with Auryx offered additional insight and information for Coria to factor into subsequent simulations. In time, these simulations become more refined as more information is gathered. The Festering Core Strike. And here we have the denouement of Auryx's resurrection. The strike is littered with copious amounts of both Vex and Taken enemies. At the heart of this strike is a Vex mind core that the Taken are attempting to take control of, or rather whoever is controlling the Taken at the current time. During the course of the strike, we are in contact with Commander Zavala for tactical support, and later Eris Morn joins the party, adding her own melodramatic, insightful commentary. When it becomes apparent as to what the Taken are after, Zavala questions why the Taken would be so interested in a Vex core. Eris then corrects him by redirecting his question by stating that it isn't what the Taken want, as they have no will of their own. It is what whoever is directing the Taken wants, and why that person would want a Vex core. Given the history of Destiny 2 so far, this strike has the markings of Savathun all over it, particularly since the final boss is Barisk, envoy of Savathun. That's kind of a giveaway, just a bit. But the question still stands. Why would Savathun want Vex tech? Well, the Vex are masters at creating predictive technology and running simulations. They observe, record, and catalog everything they come in contact with or experience with machine efficiency. They share a collective consciousness for the purpose of predicting and becoming a master of all possible outcomes. Sound familiar? It should, since that is precisely what Auryx's true nature is. If Savathun is able to take control of Vex tech at that scale and leverage it with what is known in the world's grave, the range of scenarios that they would be able to be simulated would be immense and would be done so with extreme accuracy. There is the potential here that the Hive gods may be able to do these things to such an extreme degree that it may be sufficient display of long thought that it could bring back Auryx the Taken King. And then he would be back and would have use of a Vex Mind Core at his disposal. Alright, to wrap everything up, here's what we have established so far. If you are killed in your throne world, it is a true death. This we already know. Still, even so, you can still be brought back. Xivu Arath was brought back with war. Savathun was brought back with trickery. We also know that the Vex are masters of understanding, and that understanding is Auryx's true nature. And finally, we know that Savathun is controlling the Taken to hijack a Vex network. One final bit of in-game commentary comes from one of the Tolan patrols on the moon, specifically the one in the Scarlet Keep. Quote, "Heresy was born here, in the Keep, where the daughters of Crota first began their experiments with nightmares. It was here their priestess asked the question that her sisters would not. If Auryx cannot be resurrected, can he be remade? The hidden swarm's abhorrent behavior sprung from a simple conjecture. What if Auryx meant to die so that he might be reborn? Ludicrous teleological thinking, an affront to everything he held dear. Unfortunately, Auryx is not here to correct them." So, there you have it. The daughters of Crota began to wonder if they cannot resurrect the Taken King, could he be remade? And if he were to be remade, how exactly would that be done? Methinks Savathun has figured out the way. For he is understanding, and he will be conjured back with understanding. And that concludes this video. If you would like to support the channel but can't think of anything to leave us a comment, write the word understanding in reference to what it will take to bring back Auryx and what the Hive gods will obtain should they gain control of the Vex core. You can follow me on Twitter at VGXTPod for more updates on the channel and my regular podcast, Videogame Crosstalk, the monthly podcast of gamers talking tech, science, and whatever else comes to mind. Until then, I'll see you in the tower.
Kill the Taken Commander and secure the central sphere. I think the Vex can handle the rest.
Savathun is gathering her strength, Zavala. If we hope to survive what's to come, we must prepare.
We defeated Auryx. If Savathun wants a fight, she'll get one.
She is not as foolhardy as her brother. She would never risk a direct confrontation. We will know her next move only when she makes it, and only if we're wise enough to recognize it.